Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time we are tackling habits, specifically building better habits. And for this one, we have James Clear's Atomic Habits.
Always a good one. I think everyone wants to build better habits, or at least most of us do.
For sure. And Clear has a ton of really great strategies for making those habits stick.
He does. Where do you want to start with this one?
Well, I think one of the most powerful ideas in the book is this concept of tiny changes, consistently applied, leading to remarkable results over time. You know, that whole 1% better philosophy.
Yeah, I love that idea. It just makes sense, right? Like, it seems so small, so manageable, like anybody can improve 1% each day, right?
Exactly. But then when you think about it, like if you actually did that every single day for a year, you would end up 37 times better by the end.
37 times, see, that's what I mean. It's like that compound effect in action, but applied to self-improvement.
Okay, I have a question. So, like, I get it, small changes, big results. But what about those times when you're putting in the effort, but you don't see those big changes right away? You know, like, how do you stay motivated when it feels like you're stuck on a plateau?
Oh, yeah, that is so real. Clear actually talks about this. He calls it the plateau of latent potential. It's like you're putting in the work, but it feels like nothing's happening.
Yeah, it's like you were just banging your head against a wall sometimes.
Exactly. But then you hit that critical point and bam, you have a breakthrough.
Okay, so how do we push through those plateaus, those times when we're not seeing those immediate results?
Well, it goes back to trusting the process, like even when we don't see those immediate results, our efforts are still accumulating behind the scenes. It's like melting an ice cube. You can apply heat for a while and it seems like nothing's happening, but then suddenly it starts to melt. It just takes time.
I love that analogy. So how do we make sure we are setting ourselves up for those wins, those breakthroughs?
Well, that's where those 4 laws of behavior change come in.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about those. The first one is make it obvious, right?
You got it. And this is where we have to get real with ourselves about those unconscious patterns that are shaping our days.
You mean like those mindless habits we don't even realize we have, both the good and the bad?
Exactly. Clear suggests creating what he calls a habit scorecard. Basically, it is just like it sounds. Make a list of your habits and see what's up.
Okay, so we are hitting the pause button and taking stock of what's actually happening. So once we know what we are working with, what is next?
Well, we have to remember that we are visual creatures, like crazy visual. So if we want to make a habit stick, we got to make it obvious, like impossible to ignore.
So like if I'm trying to drink more water, I should make sure I always have a full water bottle on my desk where I can see it.
Exactly. Out of sight, out of mind. You have to make it easy for your brain to choose the right option.
That makes sense. So then to break a bad habit, you would do the opposite, right? Like if you were trying to cut back on social media, you could leave your phone in another room.
Precisely. It's about being strategic with your environment.
Oh. This reminds me of something else. Clear talks about implementation intentions.
Yes, it is one of my favorites, and it is so simple.
Remind me again how this one works.
Okay, so instead of saying, I want to exercise more, which is like way too vague, you would say something like, I will go for a 20-minute walk in my neighborhood every morning at 8 a.m.
Ah, so you are getting super specific. You are eliminating that decision fatigue, that mental back and forth by pre-committing to a specific plan.
Exactly. And this actually ties into another powerful strategy, habit stacking.
Okay, I am intrigued. Tell me more about this habit stacking.
Okay, so think of it like this. You are basically leveraging the momentum of an existing habit, something you already do consistently, to build a new one.
So for example, after I pour my morning coffee, I will meditate for 5 minutes.
Exactly. See, you have already got it. By anchoring your new habit to an existing one, you're creating a natural trigger that makes it more likely to stick.
So you're basically just hacking your brain.
You could say that. But it's not just about tricking your brain into building good habits. It is also about making those habits attractive.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we make those sometimes tough habits more appealing? I feel like I could use some help with that.
Who couldn't? Well, this is where we have to tap into our brain's reward system a little bit.
Oh, I'm all about rewards. Tell me more.
Well, it all comes down to dopamine. Our brains love dopamine. It's that feel-good neurochemical that gets released when we do something pleasurable.
So we need to find ways to associate those good habits with that dopamine hit.
Yes. And one way to do this is through something called temptation bundling.
Okay, I am loving all these catchy terms. Break it down for me.
So temptation bundling is basically just linking something you need to do with something you want to do. For instance, let's say you are trying to get yourself to work out more regularly, but you also really love listening to podcasts.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
So, you would only allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcast while you are working out. That way, you're pairing something potentially less enjoyable, like exercising, with something inherently pleasurable.
That is actually brilliant. I am definitely going to try that one.
It is all about making those should-dos feel more like want-to-dos.
Genius. I can already see how this is going to revolutionize my approach to habits.
It is all about working with your brain, not against it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. So where do we go from here? What is the next step in making these habits stick?
Well, that brings us to the third law. Make it easy.
Make it easy. I like the sound of that.
It is all about reducing the friction.
Reducing the friction. What do you mean by that?
Okay, think about it like this. Our brains are always looking for the path of least resistance, right?
Yeah, I am all about conserving energy whenever possible.
Exactly. So if you want to make a habit stick, you have to make it as easy as possible for your brain to choose that option.
So, like, instead of keeping my workout clothes tucked away in a drawer, I should probably just lay them out the night before so they are ready to go in the morning.
Now you are getting it. Or like prepping your healthy meals for the week on a Sunday so you do not have to think about it when you're tired and hungry during the week.
Oh, meal prepping. Such a good idea, but I always forget about that one.
It is all about those little things, those little tweaks to your environment that can make a big difference.
Okay, that makes sense. Remove the obstacles. Make it a no-brainer.
Exactly. Clear actually calls this mastering the decisive moment. It is like those little choices that we make throughout the day that often determine whether we stick to our habits or fall off track.
Oh, I like that. Mastering the decisive moment. That feels powerful. So then it is really about optimizing those little decisions, those little moments where we have the opportunity to choose the right path.
Exactly. And those small choices, they add up over time, right?
They do. Small changes, big results. We have heard that somewhere before.
Exactly. And one technique I have found super helpful for making those habits feel less daunting, especially at the beginning, is the 2-minute rule.
Oh, yeah. The 2-minute rule. I have heard of this one. Remind me how this works again.
It is so simple.
Mm-hmm.
When you're starting a new habit, you break it down into something that takes 2 minutes or less to do.
Oh, I see. So instead of being like, I am going to write a novel, which feels totally overwhelming, it is much more manageable to say, I am going to write for 5 minutes each day.
Exactly. It's all about making it super easy to get started because once you've taken those first few steps, it's so much easier to keep going.
Momentum. It is all about that momentum.
Exactly. And that actually leads us to the fourth law, which is make it satisfying.
Make it satisfying. Okay, so this is about making sure we feel good about the habits we're building, even when they are challenging.
You got it. And this goes back to that dopamine loop that we were talking about earlier. Remember, our brains crave that immediate gratification.
Yes. And the problem is that the rewards of good habits often take time to materialize. Like a lot of time.
Right? While the rewards of those not so good habits are often like instant.
Yeah, it is like our brains are working against us sometimes.
They are. It is that instant gratification monkey on our backs. But there are ways to hack this. One really effective strategy is to find ways to reward ourselves in the moment every time we stick to our good habits, no matter how small they seem.
So like, if I'm trying to cut back on sugar, but I have a killer sweet tooth, could I like give myself permission to enjoy a small piece of dark chocolate after dinner, but only if I have resisted those sugary treats throughout the day?
You are catching on so quickly. It is about finding those healthy rewards, those things that feel indulgent and celebratory. It does not have to be a big thing.
Okay, that is a relief. So we have all these strategies for building better habits.
Yeah.
But I am curious, what about when we fall off track? Like what happens when we slip up when we miss a day, or, let's be honest, a whole week of our habit streak?
Oh, it happens. We are all human. But here's the thing. It is not about being perfect. It's about being consistent.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Because life happens, right?
Exactly. And that is where self-compassion comes in. Like, beating yourself up for slipping up is not going to help.
No, it is probably just going to make you want to give up altogether.
Exactly. So acknowledge the slip-up, be kind to yourself, and then just focus on getting back on track as soon as possible.
Okay, I can do that.
And remember, every day is a new opportunity to make a fresh start. So do not get discouraged if you have a setback. It is all part of the process.
You are good at this, like a
Sure.
cheerleader for good habits.
I try. Now, where were we? Oh, yes, making habits satisfying.
Right, so rewarding ourselves for those small wins. What else?
Oh, Clear also talks about the power of visual trackers, like, a habit tracker or a calendar where you can physically mark off each day that you successfully completed your habit?
Oh yeah, I have totally used those.
Yeah.
It is amazing how motivating it can be to actually see your progress,
Yeah.
like to have that visual reminder of how far you have come.
Right. It is like giving yourself a little visual high five every day.
I love that.
Hmm.
A visual high five. Okay, so we have talked about making those habits obvious, attractive, and easy. We have covered how to make them satisfying even when we hit those inevitable bumps in the road. Is there anything else we are missing? There was actually one more thing I wanted to touch on.
Okay, what is it?
Well, we have talked a lot about like the practical side of building better habits, the strategies, the techniques, all that good stuff.
Yeah, the nitty gritty.
Exactly. But I think there is also this deeper layer to it all, this why behind our actions. And I think Clear does a really good job of addressing this in the book.
Oh, absolutely. He goes beyond just the mechanics of habit formation. He talks about the importance of identity, like who we believe we are and how that shapes our behaviors.
Yes. It is not just about doing the things. It is about understanding the motivations and the deeper meaning behind those actions.
Exactly. He says that, lasting change requires more than willpower. It requires more than even having the perfect strategy. It requires aligning our habits with our core identity.
Okay, so this goes back to that idea of being versus doing, right? Like
Yeah.
who we are at our core versus what we do on a daily basis.
Exactly. He says, we should be asking ourselves not just, what do I want to achieve, but also, who do I want to become?
Oh, that is such a good question. So before we even start trying to build new habits, we
Mhm.
need to get clear on those values, those aspirations. Like what kind of person do we want to be in the world? And then we can choose habits that are a reflection of that vision.
Precisely. Because when our actions are in alignment with our values, with our sense of self, they become more meaningful.
And more importantly, probably way more sustainable.
Oh, 100%. It's not about forcing yourself to do something you don't really believe in?
Because it is not about checking things off a list. It is about living a life that feels truly authentic.
Yes. And when you think about it, this idea of aligning habits with values, it also extends outward to our relationships with other people.
Okay, you are saying that it's not just about personal growth, it's
Mhm.
also about social responsibility.
Exactly. Clear talks about how our habits can actually have a ripple effect on the people around us.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yes. And he gives the example of that broken windows theory.
Oh yeah, the broken window theory. Remind me about that one again.
So it is this idea that if there's a single broken window in a neighborhood and it is left unfixed, it can actually lead to more neglect and even crime.
Oh, right, because it sends the message that nobody cares.
Exactly. So even those seemingly small acts of carelessness, of disregard, it can create a negative ripple effect. But on the flip side, if we make an effort to be kind, to be helpful, to be responsible, those actions can actually inspire others to do the same.
Oh, I love that. It is like our habits have this power to create a ripple effect, not just in our own lives, but in the world around us. So powerful.
It is. And it all comes back to those tiny changes, those 1% improvements that we were talking about earlier.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder.
I'm ready.
We've talked a lot about the science of habits, the strategies, the psychology, all of that. But ultimately, the most important ingredient in this whole equation is you.
So well said. You are the architect of your own life. You have the power to choose your habits, to shape your behaviors. You get to decide what your future looks like.
And it is not about waiting for the motivation to strike. It is about taking action. Like right now, today, making those small choices each and every day that move you closer to the person you want to be.
Yes. Be patient with yourself. Celebrate those small wins. And never forget, you have everything you need to succeed.
Building better habits, it is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
And it is a lifelong pursuit of growth, of learning, of becoming the best version of yourself.
Yes. Love it.
And on that note, this has been our deep dive into atomic habits. We hope you have all found this helpful, and we wish you all the best on your habit-building journeys.
To better habits.
To better habits.